piggybacking off what Savannah said, what her topic is, piggybacking off of our conversation earlier, I'm going to talk about the Zelda timeline. As we all know, the Zelda timeline is a extremely contentious topic among the Zelda faithful. It splits off into 3 different paths. It's, dare I say, extremely convoluted. It, dare I say, doesn't matter. So my question to you guys is, why do Zelda fans, why do we care so much about the timeline? And this is coming from me, a guy who, you know, it doesn't really matter to me. It's kind of neat, but at the same time, it doesn't matter to me that much. But I know that it just means so much to some other, you know, so many other fans, and I want to get your guys' take on why that is.
It doesn't necessarily so much mean so much. For me, I think it's interesting and it kind of opens up more stories and gameplay kind of thing on where they can take the story, so they don't have to be stuck and bogged down with one kind of, you know, way for the game to go, one timeline. I think it kind of opens things up for different possibilities, and so I like having all the different timelines. Keeps it interesting, in my opinion.
The timeline...
But you wouldn't necessarily need them.
Yeah, the timeline issue is always an interesting one. I think Zelda fans at heart enjoyed the idea of a timeline concept, and that, you know, all these games could be linked together if you looked hard enough or if you paid attention enough to different details. And I think that there were always the fundamental basics of a timeline in mind if they wanted to implement one, but because the execution was so, I don't want to say sloppily done, but like the way it came about, it probably was not handled the best way, and so that kind of soured people's reactions to it, and so it became this whole convoluted nonsense that.
See, to me, it's just weird that there's a separate timeline where the hero is defeated.
Why?
I
though?
never lost in Ocarina of Time.
Why though? Like it makes sense to me. I could see it.
I just think because it's weird to me, because so you're telling me, like, Zelda at its core is a series about good triumphing evil, but this game, this timeline has told you that evil has triumphed good, and so
I don't
to
believe
me
that at all.
That's just like,
I don't believe that at all.
but it's right there. The hero is defeated.
Yeah,
maybe
no.
maybe in the long term, no, evil did not defeat good.
No,
Because
that's not what I meant.
your
That's
link
not
to
what I
the
meant.
past,
I did
but-
not mean I can't see the downfall happening. What I mean is I don't see Zelda as a series all about good triumphing over evil. To me, Zelda has always been a series about overcoming struggle and moving through life and experiencing the adventure that all of life has to offer. And sometimes,
I agree with that.
and a part of that is failing. And I think that the concept of Link being able to be defeated was something that I think more people needed to have been able to consider. Like, it's
It made it more relatable.
yeah,
In a sense.
absolutely. Like, Link can fall, but it doesn't mean it's the end, because we still see him succeed in A Link to the Past and the Oracle games, Link's Awakening, etc. Although Link's Awakening, you could argue nobody won out on that one. But you know, like,
Yeah.
It's true.
I don't fundamentally believe that Zelda is all about good triumphing over evil. It's about life, and it's about being able to overcome struggle, certainly, and living life out. But it's about the adventure. It's about the road, the journey.
I guess like in the journey, more often than not, the journey takes you to good overcoming evil. But that's a great answer too. That was a really great answer. So even just getting to the straight up logistics of the timeline, the series is called The Legend of Zelda. Legends are kind of fabricated. Legends are altered over time. They're not meant to be, in exact historical details, which is why I guess for me, the timeline, when there's references to stuff, I can just, in my mind, I just picture some guy in a Witcher 3 pub telling a story about Link to some other guy, right? And so when they're throwing references in like different races or different monuments or something like that, to me, it's very easy to brush off, but it just seems like and it's not a knock on anyone that does this, but it seems like there's a good portion of fans that just kind of cling to everything about that. And I've always been like almost envious in a way of like how enthusiastic some people are about all those different homages in the games, because try as I might, I get excited about the Zelda games, but it's just like the timeline has never mattered to me, and the only thing like that's ever really excited me in a game was seeing the very, very first timeline, which was the Skyward Sword, where the Master Sword was created.
Okay, I think with the definition of legend, Nintendo, I think, was definitely going along that route to begin with. They started off with that idea, and we're probably going to continue that for some time. But when games like A Link to the Past started coming out, and then Link's Awakening and Ocarina of Time, I think it became a little bit harder for them to do that because they started connecting all of these games to one another, some in large and direct ways. For example, if people remember, like the running theory at the time was that A Link to the Past told the story of Ocarina of Time and the Sealing War and Imprisoning War. It wasn't until later we found out that happens supposedly after. But like I think it kind of evolved as an idea that yes, it's a legend, but it's beyond that now. You know what I mean?
I don't disagree. It's always been a fascinating subject for me. So like at what point did were you guys just like man, I'm like I'm really into the timeline theory, like for Breath of the Wild, for example, like I'm really into like trying to pick apart these clues and puzzles and stuff like that. Like at what point did the Zelda timeline start meaning something to you, if it ever has?
That's a good question. I think I'm trying to remember as far back as I can, because like I said in the first episode, I've been involved with the Zelda series since before I can even remember. I was 4 years old when I played my first Zelda game. I think I don't think I really ever considered the full aspect of timelines, things like that, probably until I was around 10, which was about when Majora's Mask came out. But I do remember that when I was playing Ocarina of Time, the whole concept of time travel was really interesting to me, and I was always a kid who was interested in space and the universe and how time as an actual function worked. Obviously I didn't really understand any of those concepts until later, but I think I'm not super heavily invested in the timeline, if only because I saw the way that it was executed. I was like, okay, I can see why those things happened, and I can see why they ordered it the way they did, but I think nowadays I'm more interested in the concepts of how they execute time travel and how they execute those timeline ideas in the actual games as opposed to the timeline as a whole. I think one of the interesting things about the timeline is that they essentially tried to give the fans something that they wanted for the longest time. And so I think if we look past the fact that it may not be exactly how we saw it as younger children or younger adults, whenever you got involved in the series, if you try and look at it, I guess, with more of an open mind and try not to be so focused on like the most minute of details, you can enjoy it and you can kind of get in it and behind it. But I also had that one friend when I was younger who was a huge proponent of the legend thing, where none of them are connected. They're all legends, and they have these small references for fun. But
See, that's more so where I'm at.
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think.
Right.
If you like the timeline, you like the timeline.
Like this-
If you like the Legends idea, you like the Legends idea. It works for everybody, honestly.
This is kind of my theory, and it's kind of like a cold, distant theory. But like, I feel like as Zelda fans, like we as Zelda fans like puzzles, and the timeline I think was a puzzle for a lot of people that maybe, you know, you weren't getting Zelda games every year back in the day, so it was something for them to keep busy with, or keep the spirit of Zelda alive in between games.
Always a point of
And I
contention
think
kind of
that,
thing.
yeah, and I think that people like putting the puzzle together more than they actually liked having like Nintendo spell out this official timeline for us.
Right.
Would be my running theory on it, but
I could agree with
it's
that.
been, you know, I've always been like not a huge proponent of the timeline. It's not my favorite Zelda subject to cover. I find it fascinating, but more so in the sense of how other people find it fascinating, rather than I find the timeline fascinating itself. And that just might be because I'm like a Zelda in the real world kind of guy versus a lore kind of guy. But it's definitely... you brought it to my attention this week, Taylor, when we were chatting, and it was something that I wanted to kind of explore and get my feelings out for, and just talk about, you know, what it is about the timeline that I like, don't like, etc., etc. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Certainly, thank you. I mean, I'm glad that we got to explore it, because I mean, as a Zelda fan, I'm always interested in hearing what other Zelda fans think about these kinds of things. And we're all different people. We all have different opinions on various matters. And timeline, I think, if you take it lightly, can be a fun topic of discussion. And you know, whether you're into it or not, it's something that is fun as a concept, maybe not necessarily an execution, but you know, it doesn't have to be the end-all be-all for things.
So I think, just wrapping this up, the question that is on everybody's mind, the question that needs to be answered by you guys in 5 seconds or less is, what timeline is the Legend of Zelda animated series in? Go.
Ooh, Downfall.
Yes.
Absolutely. If you're that desperate, you got to be in the Downfall timeline.